In 2008, the U.S. government created $2 trillion out of thin air. No robbery, no loan, no printing press running overnight. Just a number typed into a computer, and it was completely legal. They didn't call it printing money, of course. They called it quantitative easing, because if you name something boring enough, nobody asks questions. Since then, they've done it 4 more times. The total? Over $9 trillion created from nothing. And every time they did it, your savings got quietly, invisibly smaller. This is the trick the Federal Reserve has been running for 16 years, and almost nobody understands how it actually works. Until now. The Fed isn't what you think it is. Before we get to the trick, we need to talk about the magician, the Federal Reserve. Most people think it's a government agency. It isn't. Not exactly. The Fed is a private central bank with a government mandate. It was created in 1913 in secret on a private island off the coast of Georgia. 7 men, representing roughly 1/4 of the entire world's wealth. They arrived in disguise, using only first names so the staff wouldn't recognize them. The meeting didn't officially exist. What came out of it did. The Federal Reserve Act was signed into law that same year, and from that moment, America outsourced its money supply to a bank that answers to almost no one. What does the Fed actually do? 2 things, officially. Keep inflation low, keep employment high. September 15, 2008, Lehman Brothers, one of the oldest investment banks in America, filed for bankruptcy. Not a small bankruptcy. $639 billion in assets, gone. The largest bankruptcy filing in American history. Within hours, panic spread. Banks stopped lending to each other. Credit markets froze. The stock market went into free fall. This wasn't just a bad week on Wall Street. This was the financial system having a heart attack. The government had 2 choices: let it collapse and watch the Great Depression replay itself, or intervene. They intervened. Congress passed a $700 billion bailout package, but Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson knew $700 billion wasn't enough. The hole in the financial system was bigger, much bigger. So they called the Fed, and the Fed did something it had never done before in its 95-year history. It created money. Not by taxing anyone, not by borrowing from China, by typing numbers into a computer screen. $1.75 trillion created in months. They called it Quantitative Easing, QE1, and it worked. Sort of, for some people. We'll get to that. How the trick actually works. Here's where most explanations lose people, so let's keep it simple. Imagine the economy is a patient lying in a hospital bed. The patient has stopped spending, stopped borrowing, stopped moving. The doctors, that's the Fed, need to get blood flowing again. Normal medicine, cut interest rates, make borrowing cheap, encourage spending. But by 2008, interest rates were already at 0. You can't cut below 0. Well, actually you can, but that's a different nightmare. So the doctors reached for an experimental drug, quantitative easing. Here's exactly how it works. 3 steps. Step 1. The Fed opens its account, an account that can never run out of money. Bonds are basically IOUs. The government borrows money and promises to pay it back with interest. Banks hold billions of these bonds. The Fed buys them, pays the banks now have cash instead of bonds. Step 2. Those banks now have enormous reserves sitting in their accounts. The idea, banks will lend that money out to businesses and people. Businesses invest, people spend, economy recovers. Who actually got rich? Here's the part they left out of the press conference. The banks got the money first. Not you, not small businesses, not the teacher whose pension just got cut. The banks. And what did the banks do with it? They didn't lend it to struggling families. They invested it in stocks, in real estate, in financial assets, and those assets exploded in value. The S&P 500 went from 666 points in March 2009 to over 4,700 by 2021, a 600% increase. Sounds great, right? Unless you didn't own stocks. And in America, the top 10% of households own 89% of all stocks. So when the market tripled, the rich tripled. And when new money floods the system, every dollar already in existence becomes worth slightly less. Your salary stayed the same. Your groceries got more expensive. Your rent went up. Your savings, sitting quietly in a bank account earning 0.01% interest, slowly evaporated. Economists have a polite name for this: inflation. But there's a less polite way to say it. Every time the Fed creates money is a tax on everyone who holds dollars. A tax nobody voted for. A tax nobody announced. A tax that the people who designed the system were first in line to avoid. There's a word for when a government secretly reduces the value of its currency to pay its debts. It's called debasement. Ancient Rome did it by shaving the edges off gold coins. America does it with a keyboard. Different century, same trick. 2008 was supposed to be a one-time emergency measure. It wasn't. 2010, economy still sluggish. Fed creates another $600 billion. 2012, still not enough. Fed starts buying $85 billion every month for 2 years. 2020, COVID hits. Stock market crashes 34% in 33 days. The Fed's response? $120 billion per month. Within 18 months, the Fed's balance sheet went from $4 trillion to nearly $9 trillion. To put that in perspective, the Fed took 100 years to accumulate its first $1 trillion in assets. It added $5 trillion more in 18 months. And this time, the money didn't just stay in banks. The government sent stimulus checks directly to people. Demand exploded. Supply was still broken from COVID. The result? The worst inflation in 40 years. Groceries up 25%, rent up 30%, car prices up 40%. The Fed had spent 12 years insisting QE didn't cause inflation. Then it caused inflation. Their solution? Raise interest rates faster than they had in any period since 1981, which crashed the bond market, which triggered a banking crisis in 2023. 3 medium-sized banks collapsed in a single week. The cure became the disease, and the disease required more of the cure, the trap. Here's the real problem. The Fed can't stop. America's national debt is now over $36 trillion. To service that debt, just to pay the interest, not pay it off, costs over $1 trillion per year, more than the entire U.S. defense budget. If interest rates stay high, the government can't afford its own debt. If rates go back to zero, inflation comes back. If they print more money to cover the gap, the dollar loses credibility. Every exit leads to a different cliff. This is what economists call a debt trap. You borrowed so much that the only way to survive is to keep borrowing. Ancient empires collapsed this way. Rome, the Ottoman Empire, Weimar Germany. They all reached the point where the debt was too big to repay honestly, so they cheated, quietly, officially, legally. They called it monetary policy. The wildest part of all this? It's not illegal. The Fed was designed to do exactly this. The 7 men on that island in 1913 built a machine that could create money, control its price, and decide who gets it first, and they made themselves the machine operators. You were never supposed to understand how it works, because the moment you do, you realize something uncomfortable. The game was never designed for you to win. It was designed for you to keep playing. As a wise man once said, "Give me control of a nation's money supply, and I care not who makes its laws."